Going to call to order the November 5th, 2020 meeting of the North Andover Planning Board. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitation on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting of the North Andover Planning Board will be conducted via remote participation. Specific information and the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and parties with a right and or requirement to attend can be found on the town's website at www.northandoverma.gov. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to watch the meeting may do so on their televisions by turning to Comcast Channel 8 or Verizon Channel 26, or by going online to www.northandovercam.org. No in-person attendance of members of the public, of members of the board, or applicants, or anyone participating will be allowed, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time. In the event that we are unable to do so, despite best efforts, we will post on the Town of North Andover website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceeding as soon as possible. If the public would like to participate in a public hearing, which we will be having, we will not be having a public hearing, but we'll be having a discussion item. But if anyone wants to participate or ask a question or comment, please do so prior to or during the meeting to send an email to Jean Enright, JENRIGHT at northandoverma.gov. The question or comment will be read during the proceeding and responded to accordingly. Okay, we have one item on our agenda tonight. Actually two. We'll do minutes. We'll do that at the end. But first, we're going to do Royal Crest Estates, 1 and 28 Royal Crest Drive, Trinity Financial, Jim Keefe, proposed master redevelopment plan for the property. Discussion topics tonight may include fiscal impact analysis, high-level key findings, dimensional information, as well as traffic. I'm going to first turn to our planning director, Jean Enright. It's been a long day. Jean Enright to tell us where we are and what we're doing tonight. Jean, thank you.
Okay, so tonight, as you said, we're going to focus on the Trinity Royal Crest redevelopment proposal. The working group met on October 29th. For the most part, the group reviewed the proposed building heights in relation to residential neighborhoods and Route 114. The number of floors per building, and Merrimack College building heights. Proposed setbacks and on-site buffering were also reviewed along with specific residential five dimensional requirements that exist today. So the focus really was on buffering and how it's addressed in other aspects of the zoning bylaw. And there was a lot of discussion around zoning districts for some of the business districts as well as industrial districts that abut residential developments. There's often a provision that allows for a 50-foot setback traditionally. However, when they abut a residential development, that buffer extends another 50 feet for a total of 100. The first 50 feet of which is required to be unbuilt upon, unpaved, wooded area with no development at all. And so the board had a sensitivity, the working group had some sensitivity to setbacks and balancing the requirement from the neighborhoods versus 114. There'll obviously likely be different setbacks, but sensitive to how others are handled in the zoning bylaw today. There was also discussion about open space and requirements exist in bylaws today in terms of planned residential developments when open space becomes a requirement in order to allow for smaller lot sizes. The bylaw specifies as a % of open space required, and so we had some brief discussion related to that. One member of the group suggested that it might be helpful to see heights of buildings in other areas that directly abut residential neighborhoods, and the proponents have some information related to that, and they have some display material in their presentation. It was also noticed at this working group meeting that there's 3 residential homes that front on Route 114 between Berkeley Road and the entrance to the existing Royal Crest. These are 312, 318, and 322 Turnpike Street. And again, it was a very brief discussion, but we may want to consider them in some manner in terms of this overlay and development proposal. In regards to draft zoning, it was affirmed that the smart growth plan-based zoning bylaw, pulling primarily from the Osgood overlay bylaw and some similar zoning used in other communities, was the approach we would like to take. This approach includes the establishment of subdistricts in which certain dimensional requirements and use regulations could be created, which would apply to the perimeter of the site where townhouses are proposed. Subdistricts will help provide predictability and certainty for the developer and the town. And so for tonight's packet, the proponents have included a revised revised program summary, which incorporates the 250 dormitory units, bringing the grand total of units to 1,641, and that was at the board's request at the last meeting. There's also a revised project calendar that reflects this added meeting, moves the fiscal impact analysis up to the November 24th planning board meeting, and I've added a public engagement plan after that. So tonight's focus will be on dimensional information, including setbacks, buffering, and building height, and the traffic study information. So with that, I will turn it over.
Great, thank you. Mr. Keefe, your turn now.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. We all very much appreciate you making this night available. This is a very busy time of year. That's kind of a crazy week. But we really need to get as much time in front of you as possible because we know we have to process a lot of stuff. As Jane pointed out, we're going to be talking tonight about dimensional issues relative to the site. And my colleague, Mike Lozano, will be walking you through that, has submitted some presentations for the board to review. We're also going to be doing a deep dive on the traffic study. That has been an item that people want to hear more about. So tonight, our friends from VHB are here to walk you through that. Again, before we begin, I just want to again thank you so much for making this night available. We've got a lot of stuff to cover. Insofar as the fiscal study is concerned, we had hoped to be able to lead this process off with the fiscal study because we think it's going to be extremely beneficial to the town. But we've all agreed that we need to do a little bit more work on that and tighten it up. And I guess the sentence of the day is we're going to wait for all the votes to be counted before we issue that fiscal study, if you know what I mean. With that, I'm going to turn it over to probably the traffic study is the best place to start. And Matt Keeley from VHB is here with us, in addition to Beth Niemi, who's from Elkis and Manfredi, to talk about some of the master plan issues. And again, we're also joined by our colleagues, Patty Schrader and James Huang from AIMCO. With that, Matt, why don't you take it away?
Sure. So is Jean going to be sharing the presentation on the screen so that people can see it, or am I just talking from my own slides here?
Eitan, what's your preference?
You can share it if you can share it as, so here's how we do it. If you want to share it, that's fine, so we can all see it, but you still have to, we have to tell us which PDF we're using, which slide and page we're on, so that anyone who's following at home can do that.
Okay.
So
Okay,
which
so I
PDF are
am
we going to?
opening, so the file I'm opening is labeled.
The bottom one, the 11/5/20 planning board meeting presentation. No, that's not it.
No? Okay.
No, you have that right. You have it right.
Okay, so I'm going to call out the file name so that the members of the public that are watching can open the same document. So the file that I'm opening is labeled 2011-05 REV, all capitalized, for revised PB for planning board traffic presentation final PowerPoint. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, and that looks right to me. So just for introductions, my name is Matt Keeley. I'm a traffic engineer with VHB. Here tonight to present the traffic study. What I thought might be helpful, just for the members of the audience that aren't familiar with how a traffic study is conducted, I can just walk through sort of the methodology and the steps that we go through, and then we can get into the details in a minute. Next slide, please. So do I have to announce each slide that I'm on? So I'm talking to slide number 2 now?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. So slide number 2 This is just basically the basic process of a traffic study. So the first thing we do is we establish a study area, all the intersections that we want to look at that may be impacted by the project. We go out and we collect traffic volumes at those intersections. We look at the crash history for each of those locations. And then we do capacity analysis to see how efficiently each of the intersections is operating. And we sort of measure how much delay is incurred by vehicles on an average basis, just to get an understanding of how well or how poorly an intersection may be operating. The next step in our study is to look at future conditions. So typically MassDOT requires us to look 7 years out for projects like this. So we get an understanding of what historic traffic growth is like, and then we project volumes out to 2027 in this case. That gets us a picture of what the volumes will look like in 2027 without our project. Then we have to generate traffic. We have to predict how much traffic our development is going to generate. Next step is we have to figure out where that traffic is coming from and going to. So we establish a trip distribution for that traffic. And we add those two together, and then we get our build traffic volume. So we get a 2027 condition with the project in place. Again, we do capacity analysis for all our intersections. Whoop, I lost a slide there. Can we get that slide back?
Yeah, Brian.
Yep. Still on slide 2. So then we do capacity analysis for each of those intersections under the 2027 no build and the 2027 build. And the difference between those two results is how we identify what impact the project is going to have on the study area locations. So next slide, slide 3. So hopefully everybody can see this, but this is the summary of our study area. So our study area basically matches the study area locations for the MassDOT 114 corridor improvements, which we'll get into in a little bit later. So all the locations are along 114. Uh-oh.
I don't know. Okay, hold on.
Nope, back one, back. Yep, that's good. So all of our locations are along 114, starting up at Waverly Road, going south, going south to Eaglewood and then Peter Street, and further south all the way down to Mill Road and Willow Street. Next slide. So I'm talking to slide 4 now. So at those intersections, we go out, we do manual turning movement counts at all those study area intersections. We've done automatic traffic recorder counts on Turnpike Street, just in between the site drives. Those counts were conducted in October of 2019, so that's obviously pre-COVID conditions. We take those volumes from 2019 and we adjust them up to 2020. When I say adjust up to 2020, that would be as if 2020 was not an abnormal year with COVID volumes. We were projecting as if 2020 was going to be a normal year. And since our volumes were collected in October, those are generally higher than average conditions, so we did not make any seasonal adjustments to those, Typically for traffic studies with the mix of uses that we're talking about, we analyze the weekday morning peak hour, 7 to 9 a.m., 4 to 6 p.m. for the weekday evening peak period, and then Saturday midday, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m.
Could you explain the specific days that you did it? How many days? And was it 1 week or was it longer than that?
The turning movement counts are usually done on one day. The ATR counts, which are either tube counts or counts done by a camera, just getting volumes on the main street on 114. Those are typically done for a few days. So
okay.
We'll probably do.
So which days of the week did you do them on?
I don't recall which day, but we typically do a Tuesday, Wednesday, or a Thursday because Monday and Friday volumes tend to be a little bit different. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday are typically representative of average weekday traffic.
So Monday and Friday are higher, right?
Mondays are just a little bit less predictable than Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. Mondays and Fridays typically have more fluctuation.
Okay, but they're higher. Yeah, I think you're admitting that they're higher, right? Yeah.
No, I'm not saying that. I can't really make that statement one way or the other.
Okay.
For the areas that you're looking at all along 114, does that capture any increased traffic that would come into the bypass, or is that felt somewhere else?
We did capture the bypass. The bypass is one of our intersections. So we are capturing all that traffic.
So the intersection is enough to catch it. Okay.
Yep. So slide 5, for the 2027 no build conditions, again, I
Etan,
mentioned.
can I apologize, Etan, can I ask a question on the?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I just took a minute to unmute. When you do your baseline traffic assessment, what do you do to establish to document when is the peak traffic for this area?
Okay.
What's your methodology to determine that?
So as I mentioned on the previous slide, so we do peak period is generally 7 to 9 and 4 to 6 for the commuter period. What we'll do is we'll put all those numbers into a spreadsheet, especially for a straight corridor like this, where all the traffic should be sort of coming in and going out. We would find a common peak hour for that. So we would add up all the traffic for each intersection and see when it's at its greatest. So let's just say go ahead.
I guess what I'm trying to get at is just understanding your methodology. You had said earlier that you typically pick a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday for consistency, but if you pick the days like that, you would, from what I understand, you'll determine peak traffic on the days you pick. But
Correct.
I was asking a broader question. What methodology do you use in order to determine the actual peak day, which presumably you'd have to sample every day to, figure that out. But, probably reasonably could exclude the weekend days. But that's what I'm trying to get to. Does your methodology provide a basis to identify actual peak traffic time, or is it really, from what I understand so far, you identify peak traffic on whatever days you pick?
Well, yeah, that's the first step, yes. But we also want to make sure that it's representative of sort of average conditions throughout the year. So that's why I talked about the seasonal adjustment earlier. So whatever day we pick, we have to make sure that that traffic is not below average for the year. So let's just say I picked a day in January or February. Those are typically lower. In that case, I would look at seasonal adjustment factors that MassDOT puts out, and I would say, okay, these are February volumes. We have to adjust these up to make sure that we're at least looking at average conditions or higher. So in our case,
I think I do have a good grasp of the average condition portion of your analysis. It's still not clear to me if your methodology identifies actual peak traffic or just peak traffic on the days you have selected to sample.
It's the peak traffic for the days we selected for our sample, but we make sure that it's at least representative of average conditions through the year or higher. So for example, we're in October, October is higher than average month conditions, but we decide not to adjust, just to provide a conservative assessment. But we don't adjust everything up to the peak for the year and look at that. We want to make sure we're at least capturing average conditions.
Well, and again, I can appreciate wanting to capture average conditions, but it seems like the methodology is missing a piece, because we would want to know the average conditions, but I would think we'd also want to know, here's the impact on actual peak, instead of impact on average and impact on peak for those days we chose to sample. I mean, am I being clear in the distinction?
No, I think so, but I think by designing things around the peak hours of the day, I think we're already capturing the peak traffic loads for this corridor. And the signal, traffic signals will be designed to accommodate that level of traffic.
Well, I do appreciate your patience in going through the methodology. I have to say that I'm not. I appreciate what you're doing for the average, for the seasonal adjustments, but I think we're missing something for actual peak times. Not that the entire analysis would be based on that, but I think that's something we need to know, is what is actual peak and what does this look like then? in addition to all the rest of the analysis. That's my view. I think we're missing something.
Okay. Go
And
ahead.
just wanted to chime in, I would agree as well, especially on the time of day, given the location. And on a commuting to Boston, just very specifically, 7 a.m. could be a little late to look. Just the traffic buildup happens well before then.
Right. No, I don't disagree with you there. The reason for the 7 to 9 and 4 to 6 is that's typically the time when the combination of commuter traffic and the traffic generated by a given development would be at its peak. So yes, traffic going into Boston may be higher at 6 a.m. because everybody's commute has gone a little bit earlier because of traffic congestion going into Boston, but the amount of traffic coming to and from a particular development would probably not peak at 6 a.m.
Okay, so I guess so this won't capture any impact to the additional people in the development commuting into work at those hours because it's not.
I would
part of
say
the-
I would say I'm capturing a higher combination of traffic in our analysis than if I had analyzed it at 6 a.m.
I might have missed this, but what about the fact that, so we're going to have a number of, potentially a number of children living here. Also, school traffic is not currently what it presumably will be in the future. Our kids are going to school 2/5 of the time. And so we're missing a good amount of school traffic currently.
But all our counts were done in 2019, so that
Okay.
that
All right.
volume is in there.
Okay, great. Thank
Yep.
you.
So everything is pre-COVID conditions.
Yeah, but we're still missing the early morning traffic where there's a problem that we're not going to see the impact. The traffic study won't talk to us about any impact or change because of the development for the start of the rush hour.
But I would still contend that the volumes that we're looking at are higher than what you're referring to.
Do we
So
know
can I
that for sure?
suggest-
Or is
can I
that just
suggest- Can I
That's-
suggest possibly a way to show us what you think will happen? And I don't mean for you to do what I'm saying literally, but I want to describe a methodology just as an example, not necessarily for you to do, but hopefully for clarity of the point. So let's say you had a graph and on the vertical y-axis is, say, traffic volume. You know, hundreds of cars per minute or whatever unit you use. And then across the horizontal x-axis, let's say it's time of day. So, you know, starting at, 4 a.m. on the left side and moving all the way across to the right. And that yields a line that shows traffic volumes from prior to Boston rush hour through the whole day. And that's all based on pre-construction, non-COVID count. In my view, that capture that could be done for 5 days of the week to show, oh, here's our actual peak day and time. And then superimposed on that is the projected traffic by volume and by time of day based on this development. And if you were to have something like that, we could then actually see on the graph what you're saying, that the effect of this development at actual peak is less than what you're saying later in the morning. I mean, it's one thing for you to say it, and you're a traffic engineer, so we respect that. But, you know, I think for the community, not only the board, but for the community to understand this and answer the question effectively, I'm not asking you to do what I just described, but I am saying that in the absence of something like that shows the actual combination over the entire, period pre-Boston rush through the day, so we can actually see what those curves are. I don't quite know how we're going to get there. Anyway, it's just a thought for you to consider.
No, sure. I mean, I can put a graph together, but I will just come back to the fact that this is sort of the industry standard way of looking at developments in peak hour traffic for traffic studies.
Yeah, I don't want to keep going and belabor it, but I will add one other point. I think we all respect industry standard, but if you want an effective way to communicate this, you're probably going to end up dealing with a lot of people, not just the board, but beyond, who, you know, may not have the same degree of background and confidence in industry standard that you do. And I'm not dismissing it. I'm saying as a matter of communication, industry standard may not be as effective as showing here's the actual flow of the traffic throughout the whole period. Thanks.
No, I appreciate the comment, and if it would be helpful in future presentations to show that, then I'll put that together.
And if I could say that we are submitting this traffic study so that it can be peer reviewed by a traffic engineer that the town chooses. And we welcome any kind of comments and input from them, and hopefully they'll cover those bases. So this is still subject to a peer review by the town's traffic consultant.
And Gene, is it possible to share these concerns and like what Peter and Kelly have raised with our traffic consultant?
Yes. So
Okay.
later tonight, I was going to recommend that the board authorize me to commence peer review immediately, set up the
So-
escrow fund.
Let's do that now.
And
So,
I was
yeah.
going to recommend, using Jeffrey Dirk at the Ness and Associates for this review. You may remember Jeffrey just represented Eaglewood Plaza recently.
Okay, yeah, yeah.
And he was the traffic engineer for the Princeton Properties development. And so we have
Okay.
some experience with them. And like I said, I would just recommend him for this.
Okay, so let's do that. Yeah, and he's already got some experience with 114 already, so that's good.
Yep.
Okay, so let's do that, and just kind of these things that we brought up here. Let's just, I mean, he can do his own job, but just say that those are thoughts that we had that we'd like to at least have addressed.
Yep, and just to add on to that, MassDOT will also be reviewing the traffic study.
Okay, fantastic. So that's great. All right, so let's keep moving on. Great, thanks.
All
Matt.
right. So we on slide 5 there. It's really small on my screen.
Yep, this is slide 5.
Okay. So for the 2027 no build conditions, as I mentioned, that's a 7-year horizon that's specified by MassDOT in their guidelines. We use a growth rate of 1% per year, which is either calculated based on other volumes we have for the area or other developments that have been recently put forward. We also contact the planning folks to see what other projects are planned in the area that might add traffic to the study area, and we have 4 listed there that we got from the planning department. And then we also look at future roadway conditions, and obviously there's a major project going through the study area here with the MassDOT improvements of the 114 corridor. Next slide. So for anyone who's not aware about the MassDOT 114 corridor improvements, it includes those 10 intersections listed there, which we're also studying as part of our traffic study. Next slide.
We're on slide 7.
Slide 7. So I just wanted to highlight 2 of the intersections that are part of the corridor improvements because they play a critical role in the project because they provide the primary and secondary access to the site. So that's 114 at Royal Crest Driveway and Walsh Way, and 114 at Andover Bypass. Next slide. So what slide 8 is showing is just an existing conditions aerial of the 114 and Andover Bypass intersection. So as I'm sure you're all familiar with it, it's a rather complicated, large intersection, has some interesting movements going on with the free right turn heading southbound to the bypass. It has that jug handle sort of style left turn heading southbound, and there's just a lot of traffic volume that goes through this intersection. If you go to the next slide.
Question.
Sure.
Yeah, and I apologize. I need to go back to your prior slide 6. With respect to the Mass DOT 114 corridor improvements, so I think that's what 6 and 7, I guess.
Yep.
Are the Mass DOT Route 114 corridor improvements, do they take into account increased development?
They will do that as part of the design process. So as they prepare the design plans for the corridor, they produce what's called a functional design report, and that will look at existing volumes and future volumes with the existing intersection layouts and with the future intersection layouts. So yes, they
Oh.
do incorporate the future volumes into their design.
So Gene, would this be something that our traffic peer reviewer, we could put a specific question in that the board's interested in how the DOT 114 corridor improvements will take this development into account?
Sure, but Peter, I will say that when the town has had meetings with Mass DOT relative to this improvement project, oftentimes Trinity has been included in those as well as Merrimack College, all within the same meeting. And I know there's been independent conversations with Mass DOT as well, but I will include the question.
Terrific. Okay, thank you.
So on the next slide, on slide 9, what I have here is the MassDOT improvement superimposed on that aerial. So you can see it's a pretty major reconstruction of the intersection. It's really just to make it more of a standard intersection with standard movements and to provide, the lanes that we need to process the additional traffic volume. Actually, and to process the existing traffic volume that's already going through there.
Slide 10.
Can you actually go back? I just wanted to point out that on the north side of that intersection is where the primary access to the site is going to be. So on the north side of 114, that's the Royal Crest site driveway. So right here is an existing aerial for the existing Royal Crest Drive. On the south side is Merrimack. You can see the crosswalk that goes across 114. That's the existing pedestrian crossing signal. And to the bottom of the page is Ahern Road, which connects to Walsh Way.
Okay, so I know Mike and I had a conversation on this earlier in the week. So Walsh Way is further, I'm saying east on the slide.
Yep.
And it has a right in and a right out existing today, closer to the hockey facility.
Yep.
There is no drive access currently. It's a walkway to this hawk light.
Correct. Yep.
Okay. So my understanding is that the Mass DOT project is going to have Walsh Way remain in its existing location with a right in and a right out, but that Merrimack internally is going to add a roadway to this, and it's going to be a signalized light instead of the hawk.
That's correct, and
Okay.
I'll show that to you on the next slide. And I apologize if there's any confusion there. We've just referred to it as Walsh Way because the intent of it is to provide access into the Merrimack campus, which eventually hits Walsh Way. So I'm sorry if there's any confusion there.
It's a little deceiving in that there's another intersection on this corridor that's going to remain, which is Walsh Way, and so this is not replacing Walsh Way.
Correct.
Okay.
So this is the MassDOT improvement superimposed on the existing aerial. So you can see on the north side of 114, that would be a signalized driveway to the site, and on the south side, that would be the new access into the Merrimack campus. The signalized pedestrian crossing is going to be accommodated as part of the signal. And then, as you said, there'll be a roadway that connects from that approach down to Walsh Way. And the right in, right out on Walsh Way is to remain. That's my understanding.
So slide 12.
Yep, slide 12. A couple of things to note just on this particular intersection. So the improvements, it's going to be a full access signalized driveway with access and egress allowed in both directions on 114. One of the benefits of this is that it's going to relieve some pressure from the 114 and Andover bypass intersection. It's also going to provide an egress from Merrimack to points north. So if you're on campus now, the only way you can go up to 495 is to go out onto the bypass and go through the big intersection. This provides an outlet onto 114 that circumvents that intersection and allows you to access I-495 and points north. I think it's also going to reduce some of the internal traffic through Merrimack campus, which should improve some safety for the students. And then, like I said, the signalized pedestrian crossing, the Hawk pedestrian signal, is going to be replaced by a signalized pedestrian crossing within that design. That's it. So before I move on, are there any questions on those two locations? All right. So if you
I-
go to slide,
I have a question. Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
Go back to slide 11.
Yep, slide 11 is shown.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that I understand what this is saying. I apologize if I'm not picking up. This is the current signal pedestrian crossing location. Is that correct?
that's correct.
And it's going to turn into a signaled vehicle crossing
It's going to be a standard traffic signal, a four-way traffic signal, yes,
for
which will have
vehicles or just people?
for vehicles and people.
Okay.
It becomes a new fully signalized traffic light. Yeah.
Say that again, Gene.
It becomes a new fully signalized traffic light.
Traffic intersection.
Intersection, yeah.
Intersection. So if we were to blow this picture back so that we could see a longer length of road, we have a big signaled intersection at 125 and 114. We come up a short distance, we'll now have this signaled traffic intersection. And then we go a shorter distance and we'll have the signaled traffic intersection that you showed in slide 9. What is, so 3 significant signaled traffic intersections in short distance. What are the standards for a road of this size having these scaled signaled traffic intersections across this short distance? And, you know, it may be that it's quite normal. I'm just not familiar with that. Can you help us understand how this matches against that type of standard? How many signaled traffic intersections, you know, per quarter mile or whatever? What's the standard?
Sure. I mean,
Peter, excuse me, if
okay.
I could just interject. Peter, the Mass DOT improvement project also proposes a signalized light at the Hillside Road Route 114 intersection as well. So it contemplates having another signalized just near the Starbucks location.
Great. Okay. Even more to the point.
So I guess there's not really a standard per se. It's really on a case-by-case basis. But what I can tell you is that the 2 intersections that I'm talking about here are about 1,300 to 1,400 feet apart. And with just the modern traffic signal equipment and the coordination and just some of the fancier smart technology that we have now, I mean, we can accommodate this type of traffic coordination with spacing as close as 500 feet. So the fact that we have closer to 1,400 feet means that we'll be able to to design the corridor to achieve a good coordination between each of the signals.
And can I just add that we haven't spent much time on the access to the proposed development, but there are proposed to be 3 right turn in, right turn out access points between these 2 signalized lights. So between the one we just reviewed as the main signalized right into the development and this one, the proposal includes 3 right-ins, right-outs. And again, that's all contingent on Mass DOT permitting for this development as well.
So it's helpful to hear those explanations and that it's not the tightest spacing of intersections that can be designed. But I have to say, from my perspective, I mean, that whole corridor from 125 out past Hillside, it's going to be a stop and go like never before. I mean, I think that's going to be a pretty significant change for people. I'm not quite sure how you, as part of the traffic study, can help us quantify that.
Well, we do traffic operations analysis as part of the traffic study, and GPI, the designer for MassDOT, also does operational analyses for their design. So the whole corridor is thoroughly analyzed in terms of intersection capacity and delay. Should we move on to slide 13, I think it was?
Yep, so no, slide 12 up.
Just for
I
the
already
record,
did that one.
just for the record, there's only, in addition to the 2 signalized intersections, there's only 2 right turn in, right turn out, not 3, I believe.
Who was
Okay.
that? Was that Jim?
Yep.
Okay, my recollection was 3, but that's okay.
And you're right, MassDOT, obviously has to embrace those, but we're hoping they will.
Okay. So the
Okay,
next,
slide 13.
yep. So the next part in our study is to look at the 2027 build conditions, and the key piece of that is to figure out how much traffic the site is going to generate. So what you see the picture of on the right side there, that's the Institute of Transportation Engineers Trip Generation Manual. And that basically contains a database of traffic counts and a whole list of different land uses that creates, equations and formulas to figure out the average of how much traffic, a particular land use generates based on its size. So we take that manual and we look at the land use codes that would apply to the proposed project. In our case, we're dealing with residential housing. Oops. So we're dealing with residential housing. We're dealing with off-campus student apartments. We're dealing with some retail, which we fall under the shopping center category with ITE, office building, and hotel. So we use this manual and the formulas and data inside it to project the traffic based on the size of the proposed development. And the next slide, I'll have a summary of what those numbers are. We don't need to get into all the numbers on the left side. That just shows the breakdown between the different land uses on site. But the overall traffic generation summary is during the weekday morning peak hour, would have a total of 631 new trips. PM is 737, and Saturday is 897. So these numbers include internally captured trips. So for example, an office worker who stops at the market on site on his way home, that's an internal trip. It didn't affect Route 114. So we consider that an internally captured credit. Pass by credits
So-
are
Are these numbers over like an hour or the entire day? What's the time window?
This is for an hour.
Okay.
Okay. So a pass by credit would be if you are already on 114 and wanted to stop in to the site and then continue your trip home. That's what we call a pass by credit. These numbers assume 100% of the people are driving. Like, we didn't take any credit for anybody using public transportation or working from home or walking and biking to the site. So this is 100% vehicles. And just to point out again, these numbers are going to be reviewed by the peer reviewer as well as MassDOT. And as part of the MassDOT review process, we'll also be doing a post-occupancy traffic monitoring program. So that's something we would basically be doing a check on our projections, because we'll do counts when the site is occupied and then compare them back to these projections.
How did you determine how many vehicles for residents there would be?
That is done with the trip generation manual. So let's just say we have 1,000 apartment units. We would plug the 1,000 into the formulas from the manual, and it goes through their calculations, and then it spits out the number of trips on average that would be generated by that level of development.
Do you know what that number, so it's by the number of units or by the number of residents?
It's by the number of units.
Do you know what that number was? Because does it go by units, by different types of bedroom of the units?
For apartments, it just goes by the number of units. For the campus housing, it goes by the number of beds.
Okay, so the apartments, it could be a 1-bedroom or 3-bedroom. It assumes the same.
Correct, because all the
Number of
sites that are in the ITE database are a mix of units. So the ITE database has counts at all different residential development sites that have 1-bedrooms, 2-bedrooms, 3-bedrooms. So we're really just taking an average of residential traffic from the ITE database. Does that answer your question?
It does. So it's assuming as long as, so there is some, you're saying in their source data, there is some mix
Yes.
of
Yes,
different types of units. So we're kind of hoping, that in order to know that we've got valid data that the mix of the development is the same.
correct. Yep.
Do you believe it is close? Do you know what the mix is in the IT? I'm just wondering, it seems like something we could be able to know, right? With whatever the IT, do they tell you what the mix is?
I think they just say that it is a mix. I don't know that we could get all the source data for it.
Okay, so we're not sure if we're apples to apples because your source data doesn't say, you just know it's mixed.
Right, but with the amount of data that it's based on, it's definitely representative of typical residential development.
Okay, we think. Okay.
Yep. So from here, next slide, please. From here, the next step in the study is to figure out where that traffic is coming from and going to. And because we have different land uses, we have different distributions. So for an office trip distribution, we base that on the US Census journey to work data. So for the people that work in North Andover, we have the information from the census of where those people are coming from. So that's how we factor in office workers. For the residential trip distribution, that's also based on journey to work data, but it takes the data from North Andover and says, okay, from the people that are in North Andover, where do they work? So that's the typical trip that they take out of North Andover and back home. And then retail and hotel trip distribution generally follow more of a residential trip pattern or the pattern that's on the existing roadways.
Where does educational traffic fit in here for students?
Educational traffic?
Well, just kids going to school.
Um, that would fall within the existing travel patterns in this area because Merrimack is the existing educational destination in this area.
I'm sorry, I was thinking K through 12 kids.
Oh.
Because I'm assuming we're gonna have more children,
Mhm.
everything in the new development. So just trying to understand kind of apples to apples of.
Yeah,
So I'm
that's
assuming there's some
something
change.
that's captured within the existing travel patterns.
In the residential traffic patterns? So that's
In the
school
travel
buses.
patterns that we counted. So it's based on our counts. And just to show what that all means graphically, the next slide has the percentages. I don't need to go through all of them, but as you can see, in the center of the page is roughly where the site is. You can see the main intersection with the bypass. The arrows in blue are for the office. The arrows in red are for the residential, retail, and hotel. And what this generally shows is that the majority of the traffic is coming to and from the major roads. We're not showing a lot of traffic going through those neighborhood streets that are, to the north of the site. The main traffic is really staying on the main roads. If you want to go to the next slide, please. So I've referred to capacity analysis throughout the presentation, and that yields what we call level of service. Level of service is a ranking from A being the best and F being the worst. And as you can see on the table on the right there, it gives you sort of the thresholds. This is from the Federal Highway Capacity Manual. So if your delay on average is 0 to 10 seconds at an intersection, you'd be a level of service A, and so on and so forth. Generally speaking, level of service D is what we consider acceptable. E is what we would consider to be at capacity, and F would be over capacity. And next slide.
So slide 18. John, I just want to add, I do have a resident comment. So when this presentation is over, I'm going to stop sharing screen to read that.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
So what we have here, I know there's a lot of information on this slide, but I thought this was the best way to at least capture what was in the results of the traffic study. So what you see in each of the boxes is you see 2020 existing conditions, 2027 no build, and 2027 build. And in one column, you see the level of service. In the next column, you see the delay, and that's in seconds per vehicle. So this is the summary of the weekday AM peak hour capacity analysis. I don't need to go through each one, but if you look generally, you can see that almost all of the intersections are at level of service D or better, with the exception of Andover and Elm Street. But what we're really looking for here is the comparison between 2027 no build and 2027 build.
So what is the peak, the AM peak hour?
I don't know what the actual peak is. I think it's 7:15 to 8:15. I can check that for you, but I just don't have that right in front of me.
Okay. And was that only when you looked, did you look before 7 o'clock? I think.
We count from 7 to 9 is when our counts are from.
Okay, so within the time frame you looked at, this is the peak. We don't know if this was the peak of the day.
Right. This is just for the AM.
From 7 to 9.
Yep.
Hey, buddy. One question I had is, it's not intuitively obvious to me why, like, when the Andover Street, if today it's F and it's going to become D, and the same thing on a couple of the other ones. If you're adding traffic to the existing situation, how can it get better?
That's because the MassDOT corridor improvements are incorporated into our no build and our build analysis. And that involves.
But how is that, like, can you give me, like, at the Andover Street and Elm Street, can you intuitively explain how it's going to improve and why?
Yes, because they're improving the intersection geometry, they're adding capacity, and they're putting in traffic signal improvements.
But, like, can you be a little bit more specific on that one? I mean, I go through that one every day, and it's horrible. What are you going to do? Widen the road?
There is some widening there. Yep. I'm trying to just pull up a plan right now. There's definitely some widening on Andover and Elm Street, and there's turn lanes on 114, northbound and southbound.
So to get to, like, a little bit to the point that Peter was making previously about methodology, what sort of, you have to have a series of assumptions and methodologies that you use to go from F to D. So, like, how much does F go down, and then when you add the volume back, how does it get to D? I guess it's still not clear to me that it feels like you're making a lot of assumptions in terms of the level of improvement.
No, I mean the numbers and letters that are in this table are not assumptions. These are generated by our analysis tools, and those analysis tools require us to put in the existing geometry at the intersection, the existing signal timings, and the volumes. And then in the future condition, if there's going to be improvements, if let's just say we add a lane to an approach that is currently at a level of service F, adding that lane is going to add capacity to that intersection. So that will in turn improve the overall operation of the intersection. So that's where you go from F to D in this case at Andover and Elm Street.
Oh, okay, fine. At Andover Street, where exactly is the lane going to be added?
I don't have a side-by-side comparison of all the improvements in front of me, but I will say that the intersection is improved with the MassDOT plans.
I mean, 92 seconds, if you've ever been there at 6 o'clock at night, there's no way in the evening it's 92 seconds. It's more like 5 or 6 minutes.
Yeah, 92 seconds is a weighted average for the whole intersection. It's not just, one direction or one movement. That is the summary for the overall intersection as a weighted average.
Okay.
Okay. So like.
Yeah, I was just going to say, and this is Mike Lozano from Trinity as well. I'm pretty sure that that VHB either has or can get the plans for this particular intersection and could pass them on to Gene to share with the board if that's something that you guys would like.
So let me also throw out another question or comment, if I could, to John's discussion with you, and you had said that it's a weighted average. So for the 92 seconds, I'm not dismissing the utility of having the weighted average. That makes sense to me. But to me, this is a second example of where there is a peak traffic pattern which this methodology will not highlight because it's embedded within a weighted average. So for my part, I would find it very useful to have a comparison of, here's the weighted average, it's 92 seconds, here's why that's important, and here's the actual peak times.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
the weighted average is 92, but you will find peak times of 4 minutes, 5 minutes. And to have that in the analysis so that we can see that and understand the importance of the two measures, to me, it's just a second example of peak that is important to have you portray in an effective way to communicate it. And I would also say the prior discussion on with, I think, Kelly, it was that you had identified the peak hour at 7:15 and you're testing from 7 to whatever it was, 6 or whatever. It's a second example of you're identifying peak within your selected days and hours of testing, but we don't know that that's peak because you're only starting at 7.
No, I heard that loud and clear earlier, and I'd be happy to present a graph of the 24-hour counts that we have, and we can actually try to obtain the data that that GPI has used as part of their design for MassDOT. Definitely happy to do that. One other thing I can point out is really the information that I'm displaying on this slide is basically as much as I can boil down all the analysis that's in the traffic study. All I'm showing here is the overall intersection level of service and delay. In the actual traffic study, each movement at each intersection is going to have its own delay, level of service, and vehicle queue summarized in a table. There's really just no way to share that in a presentation like this, but it is all in the traffic study. So like I'm saying, this is the weighted average. In the traffic study, you'll be able to see that operation for every single movement at every single intersection.
So one other question on the slide that's the PM peak, slide 19. It says the site driveway and Andover bypass. You're suggesting that it's going to be F, even after. Is that am I reading it correctly?
On an overall basis, yes, that's what it's showing.
Right. And the other thing, just to clarify the point that you made about an average, because Hillside Road's a good example. The traffic on Andover Street, on 114, that gets included in how long the wait is. In other words, you're not just doing it from Hillside Road to get onto 114. You're including the traffic that's already on 114. So if the traffic queue on Hillside Road was much longer, you would just wait it, correct?
Correct, but the results for each individual movement are in the traffic study. Okay. I couldn't display them on these slides. There's just too much information. Yep.
That's fine. That's fair enough. Because obviously, Hillside Road, you could wait several minutes to get out on the 114.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So okay.
No, I totally get that. Yep.
But I am correct that after the development, there's going to be the site driveway to Walsh Way will be F, and the site driveway to Andover bypass will be an F.
Right. Based on this analysis, yes. And something we're going to continue to do is to coordinate with DOT and GPI to make sure we make that design as efficient as possible. Those numbers could improve, but this is just the sort of snapshot that's in the traffic study. But we'll continue to work with them throughout the design phase.
Right.
And what is the PM peak that you looked at?
Again, I don't have it right in front of me, but I can get that for you.
Okay, and again, that was just between
it's an hour between 4 and 6.
Between 4 and 6, so it could be
Yep.
later. And Yeah, I just looking at the F at that one at the intersection coming off the bypass. Sat in that 4 days a week for a couple of years, so very familiar with that one.
Yep,
Usually
I
leaves in
get
6.
it. If you give me just a second, I might be able to find it. So for the AM, it's 7 to 8, and for the PM, it's 4:45 to 5:45.
Okay, within the windows that you.
Within those two
Those
windows. Yep.
Okay.
Okay. So I guess just on these 3 slides, the sort of takeaway is that we do see some significant improvements with the implementation of the MassDOT corridor improvements, and that we're not creating significant drops in level of service or increases in delay as part of our project. I don't need to belabor all the numbers on these busy slides, so we can keep going down to slide 21. So just in summary, like I was just saying, the project generated trips not expected to significantly impact surrounding residential neighborhoods, and that's primarily shown in that graphic I showed you on trip distribution, with the major movements staying on the major streets and not really funneling through residential neighborhoods. The project impacts are expected to be minor, as a couple of people noted. We do see some delays at the site driveways, and again, we're going to keep working with MassDOT and GPI to try and refine and optimize that design to the extent possible. And in terms of mitigation, this is sort of a unique situation where we are basically having our project right in the middle of a major corridor enhancement. So a lot of those improvements are really a result of the MassDOT corridor improvements. So our mitigation is really more focused on on-site improvements and making sure we have a robust transportation demand management program on the site to help reduce the use of single occupancy vehicles, try and get people to use different modes of transportation. I won't go through all those bullets, but the TDM program is really geared towards reducing the amount of vehicle traffic on the site.
So can I just ask you a question about that? Because it occurs to me where you have the most flexibility to do that is with the students. Is that a fair assumption?
Not. I mean, that's definitely a great opportunity, but there are a lot of other TDM measures that can get people out of their cars, and that's some of those things are listed on that list below there. But keep going. I didn't want to interrupt you.
One example, just off the top of your head.
Think of one example for students.
No, not for students. Other than for students.
Oh, other than for students. For example, I mean, I can read a few of them. One of the first things you have to do is join the Transportation Management Association, which is Merrimack Valley Transportation Management Association. That way they know, what you're developing, what opportunities there are to provide alternative modes of transportation, carpooling, van pooling, things like that. On site, we're going to be providing bicycle storage for employees, visitors, residents. We're going to work with Merrimack College to expand shuttle service. We can put in a bike sharing service like Blue Bike.
But like with the students, I guess that's the one that it seems to be that, okay, if there's going to be 1,000 beds, I don't think there'll be quite 1,000 cars. But what usually is the metric for that? And are you going to try to suppress the number of cars that students have that live in the student part of the housing? How does that work?
That's not really a question I can answer. That might be one more for Trinity, but
Peter, we've had discussions over the past 3 years with Jeff Doggett at Merrimack, and they are prepared to put in place guidelines and other procedures to minimize the amount of student traffic. It's not only them coming in and out by cars, but it's also trying to limit the number of parking spaces that we have available for them. So that's very much a work in progress, but we expect Merrimack, working with Merrimack, will be able to come up with some things that will have a favorable impact.
Thanks, Jim. So that's really the end of my presentation.
And if I can jump in here, just to, other questions that might come up, please feel free to send them along. Again, your peer review to deal with those specifically, but also get into a lot of detail that would have been impossible to present tonight. But the plan itself is pretty extensive and detailed, and it's mind-numbing in its detail. But I think we welcome the opportunity to have it reviewed, and we're very willing to respond to whatever issues that are raised. And then, of course, there's the whole MassDOT exercise. Needless to say, they take a very adversarial role with trip generations, and particularly after they've made this investment. So you're really going to have two sets of eyes on this to give you some comfort that we've covered all the bases. But we think we've done a pretty good job as a starting point.
Gene?
Hey, Tom, I've got another question, if I could, for the traffic analysis.
Okay.
And where is the engineer's photo? Is the engineer on the screen?
Yeah, I realized my camera was not on, but it is on now.
Okay. Thank you, Matt. Thank you.
Yeah.
So this is probably a weird question. I hope you don't mind me asking, but what do you do when you're doing a traffic study for a project like this? If the answer is, geez, this is not going to work. The traffic load is too heavy.
Typically, you would try and remedy that with additional geometric improvements. But in our case, I guess we're sort of lucky that MassDOT has really come through with a design that maximizes the capacity of the corridor.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks again.
Gene, you had a comment from that came in?
Yes, actually, it was addressed to me asking, is the audio or video of these meetings recorded and later available to the public? And so I am typing a response to him right now.
Well, can you share that too with other people watching, what the answer to that is?
Sure. The recording is available live streamed through the GovCAM website or on particular channels that are referenced on the agenda. Depending on whether you have Verizon or Comcast, you can watch or you can listen live. So it's broadcast in audio only. It is then available on the GovCAM website to hear at a later date. So you can access it and listen to the recording. The meeting packet items that the board reviewed tonight are all available via the link on the agenda, and the agenda can be accessed on the upcoming meeting calendar on the Town of North Andover homepage. And if anyone has any trouble accessing any of the information or wants more detail, you can contact me at jenright@northandoverma.gov.
Great, thank you. Okay, what's next?
Okay, I think the next part of this, Mike's going to walk us through some of the dimensional site issues, responding to specific questions that came up by the working group, as well as of some of the members here. So Mike, you ready to take it away?
Yes, absolutely. Thanks, Jim. Gene, would you mind pulling up the presentation on the screen?
Give me 1 second.
Sure.
And Matt, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
Right, can you see it?
Yep, I can see that. Everybody else see that from the board?
What is the file name for that?
So I'm going to read the file name now. So it is named RC Buffer and Height Diagrams 11.2.20 version 3 PowerPoint.
Oh, Gene, do you by any chance have the one that's dated 11/5 that I sent you earlier with just minor tweaks?
I thought I did, but
No, that's the traffic.
No, Mike.
Okay, well, we can, I mean, they're relatively minor tweaks. I think that they're important, but I'll speak about them, and then obviously we'll follow up with the board after, just to make sure that everybody has the updated graphics that just show a little bit more of the dimensional information that I think would be instructive to the discussion. So we can utilize the one that you've got there, Gene. And again, I'll just describe the minor updates that we did since I sent that to you, and we'll follow up with the full presentation. Okay, so the cover sheet, this is an image that I think everybody has seen. So this is a rendering of what we're calling the town green, and one of our new mixed-use multifamily buildings right on Route 114, like we've been talking about. You can go to the next slide, Gene. So this is an image of and something we asked our architect to put together, because we wanted to show what we're proposing here when it's fully built out, and how it looks in context. So what we want to show here is just what does it look like all together from the air. Obviously, unless you're in a plane or a helicopter, you're not going to really have this perspective. But I think it does give some context to show how what we've proposed relates to both Merrimack College, which it directly fronts, as well as the surrounding neighborhoods. So you can go to the next slide. And everybody has seen this. This is the proposed master plan. So I just put this in here for reference, just to remind everybody, the overall extent of the proposal. So you can go to the next slide. And now we'll get into some of the diagrams that we put together to address some of the specific questions that we've been hearing from you guys on the board, as well as from people in the working group. So this diagram is meant to show the relation of the building heights and sort of our intent about how we interface with the surrounding neighborhoods and context of the site. So this just essentially takes a slice through the whole site. And as we've mentioned in the past, we wanted to keep the more intensive uses and the larger buildings closest to Merrimack College, because they kind of relate to those to the same types of buildings that already exist on the Merrimack campus and 114. And as you go towards the rear of the site, the buildings start to step down, so they get more and more in context with the single family neighborhood. So again, what you see here on the right side of the image is Merrimack College, and sort of a typical building at Merrimack. The sort of distance from those buildings through the 114 corridor to our proposed buildings, and again, this slices right through the town village square that we're proposing. And then you start to step down in the building heights as you get closer to the neighborhoods. So eventually you get to 3-story townhomes, which start to really, evoke more of a single family feel. And there's still a very wide buffer, which I'll get into, but between even those 3-story townhomes that we're proposing and the single family houses to the rear and adjacent to the site. So that's what we're trying to show here.
What this slide does, in frankly a pretty rudimentary manner, is take a cross section from sort of almost the perspective of 114. But what you have not done with this is you haven't shown the perspective of the buildings from the perspective of the actually see, correct?
Well, we've done that to an extent. I think, we
No,
can.
no, you haven't. You haven't looked at it from the focal point of, you've looked at it from the 90-degree separate angle from that. I guess what I'm trying to see is something much more specific at different points on the site where the relationship to the single-family houses to the buildings will be and what it will look like.
Well, so yes, and we do have some imagery that shows that. I think that we can continue to develop that imagery, and we're happy to provide slices like this from any place, on the site that you want us to. This was one, we wanted to just show sort of a representative slice because it really kind of shows the progression and, gets the widest cross section of these as you can. If we go to some of the other and continue through the presentation, at least I can talk about the dimensions and the distances that we're talking about from our buildings, our proposed buildings, to the property line and to the existing single family houses. And I think that will be instructive, but we're happy to continue to develop this and show you views in whatever fashion you'd like. So
Mike,
Gene,
were you able to determine which Merrimack College building that is at 57 feet and in relationship on site, what location it's at?
it is the slice as you see here. You can see the section line. So I'm not sure the name of that building necessarily, but it's one of the primary buildings that sort of fronts 114.
Okay.
So if you go to the next slide. So in the updated presentation, what you will see is we've done a comparison of the average buffer between our proposed buildings and the property line, and the average buffer between the existing buildings and the property line. You don't have in front of you the existing. I'm looking at it, but we'll get that to you so you can see it. But the average buffer on the existing property with the existing buildings is 80 feet. So it's typically 80 feet from the existing Royal Crest buildings to the property line. What this diagram is showing is that the buffer that we're proposing from new structure to property line is significantly more than that. It's typically 140 feet. So we're 60 feet more away from the property line in the proposed plan than exists today.
So what's the max, what's the minimum? Where's your minimum buffer? Because you're using the term average, but
yeah.
where
So,
like the back part of Chestnut Street, that is smaller than I think on Berkeley.
Yeah, so typically it's about 100, again, it's typically about 140 feet, but we in many of the locations it's about 145, 147, 149. The max is 160. And the minimum, we can continue to go through, and I've got more of the detail in some of the subsequent images. So if you go to the next one.
What's the minimum?
So the minimum, let me scroll down. So the minimum is 28 feet, but that is at a part of the site that is essentially on 114. So if you keep scrolling through.
That's where the three houses are.
It is close. It is close to where those three houses are. Yes.
Right.
So
I mean, you have the building close to them, and I think the parking is close to them.
So if you keep scrolling down, so we can.
What slide number?
It's this one right here, Gene. It is slide. So you've got it here.
Yeah, I just need to know the slide number so I can refer to the audience. So they're not numbered, right?
They're not numbered, no.
Okay. So slide 8 of the deck.
Right. So you'll see here, and in one of the updated graphics, we also added dimensions that show the distance both to the property line and to the houses, which again, I'll get to you right after this meeting. So in that area, it's 83 feet from the parking lot, the edge of the parking lot to the property line. And existing right there is 53 feet. So there's an existing driveway that's currently today 53 feet from property line to the edge of that driveway. So
how close is the blue building to the edge of the property line?
So the blue building, if you took the dimension from the edge of the blue building to the property line, it's 80 feet. If you look,
No way it's not.
The front corner is 28 feet, right?
yeah. So if you look at the front corner to the property line, but that's far away from the house, it's 28 feet. But you can see the.
So you're proposing, how tall is that building?
That section of that building is 4 stories tall.
So you're proposing putting a 4-story building within 28 feet of the edge of the property line, commercial to residential?
Well, if you look at that section of the property line, it's the frontage on Route 114. So it's really 28 feet essentially from 114 to that building. Because of the geometry.
I guess, am I correct? What you're saying is you're proposing putting a 4-story building within 28 feet of the edge of the property line of a residential property.
In that specific location, yes.
Okay.
And Mike,
And
is
it-
the
and it's
building,
100
is
and
the
it's
building in
100
total 4 stories, or is the front section of that building 5 stories and the rear section 4?
The part of this building that fronts into our site, the long piece, not the sort of legs, is 5 stories. The 2 legs that extend to the northwest are 4 stories. So it's 129 feet from.
I'm sorry, Mike, can I just interrupt one more time? So I thought the point of this diagram originally was to hash the 5-story buildings. So to the right of this blue, you see the hashed buildings for the multifamily. So the 2 longer sections of this one should be hashed, right?
Yes. To be consistent, yes.
And
Okay.
just to be clear, this is the Merrimack dorm.
Yep.
Right. Yeah. So it's 129, and just for reference, it's 100 from that closest house. It's 129 feet from the building to the house itself.
But not from the edge of the property line.
No, at that location, at that particular location towards the house itself, it's approximately 80 feet. At the very front of the site, it's approximately 28 feet.
Okay.
And you can see the other houses, again, I wish you had the updated version of these graphics, but it's 450 feet from the edge of this 4-story building to the houses on Berkeley Road. So it's quite a distance away.
Right, yeah.
But
But you got a problem with those 3 houses on Turnpike Street.
Yes, and that's something, obviously we are cognizant of that and certainly considerate of that, and we want to make sure that we are taking that into account. And I think we did in our design, to be frank, we had a larger parking area here, but in order to create more of a buffer, we've looked at ways that we can pull back from that property line as much as we can and still get, in this case, what Merrimack needs for their building.
but I guess, I mean, you know, obviously we're hashing out the zoning now,
Yep.
but there's no zoning setback of commercial property, particularly related to residential district, that is as tight as what you're proposing there.
Yeah, and this is, this is one part of the site, and, we'll go, I'm happy to go through the whole site. This is one part of the site that, is a unique circumstance and one that we'll, together want to look at very closely.
Okay.
So, Jean, if you want to scroll back up 2 images, you can, one down from this one.
Yep, so we're on slide 6.
And I'm sorry,
So
I'm
this
sorry,
shows,
just one comment, I'm sorry, before we go on, just to kind of echo some of the comments before, it would be very helpful with the buffering picture, or understanding that the difference of heights and perspectives is actually seeing it from the viewpoint of some of these more extreme cases, so to understand, for those houses on 114, what you mean, because then we know, we don't have to guess, right? What would they be seeing?
yeah,
As well as, and then probably some of the less extreme ones more towards the back too, because I think that would help everyone really clearly see, given the layout, what does that truly mean, given the elevation and the houses that are there.
yeah, that makes sense, and that's certainly something that we can put together and have for the board. So,
If the board remembers the Amazon demonstration of view shed from Osgood Street and the fact that the building sets back X amount of feet off of Osgood, if you remember that, I think that was helpful in the Princeton properties as well, taking different points along Osgood Street and showing a view shed to the buildings. So I'll share those with Trinity and see if they may be helpful in terms of how they can display it as well. I'm not sure that they're representative, given this development is significantly different than those and what they were trying to point as terms of how they were set back from Osgood Street, but it may be helpful, so I'll share them.
yeah. So just referring back to this image, and yes, absolutely, and that would be helpful. We'll take a look at what has been helpful to the board in the past, and I'm sure we can get some more representative images showing the perspective from these surrounding areas. So we will work on that. In these cases, in these diagrams, again, what this is showing is the existing to the proposed. So in red, it's showing the distances from the existing Royal Crest, either paved areas or buildings to the property line. So you can see in almost every case here, our proposal is further away from the property line, further away from the houses that exist today. And again, in a lot of cases here, we're talking, from building to property line, it is 178 feet, 140 feet, 149 feet. Those are the types of distances typically that we're seeing around the site.
And Mike, do you want to comment on this walkway, in that the abutters have commented that that's too close to their property line and you're willing to pull that in?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've talked to abutters, multiple abutters on Quail Run and abutters on Montero Way to the rear of the site, who, we've had very good conversations with them, and we've heard them and they've heard us, and we're continuing to work with them. They currently have had issues with, in the past, have had people crossing into their property. So it's something that we're very cognizant of, and we're talking about, working with them as far as fencing along the property. But also, we had proposed a biking path around the perimeter of the site, which we still want to do. But at their request, we're going to pull it off of that property line and pull it closer into the proposed road. So it'll still accomplish the same thing and be a nice, walking, biking amenity, but it'll be further away from the property line, which we're happy to do. So in our next update of these graphics, we're going to make that change.
And just a quick, I believe in the upper left, just off the page, there's an elementary school.
Yes, that's right. Franklin School.
So the distances, no, there's none marked for that. Is it less than it was?
No, you can
more than
see
it
the red.
was?
You can see the red dimension there is the edge of an existing parking lot. It's a little hard to see, but if you have the paper version, you can see sort of the grayed out parking areas and buildings underneath the proposed. So it's 82 feet from the property line to the existing parking area. Right now, that's a wooded area between Royal Crest and the elementary school, and there's paths through there, very well-worn paths through to the elementary school. We have had thoughts about connecting, not vehicular at all, but had thoughts about having pedestrian connections to the school, but we're not, we're wanting to hear from the board and from the neighbors about whether we want a pedestrian connection there or not. We're open either way. We think it would be a nice amenity because, it would be, in a lot of ways, it would be nice to be able to walk from the site out to Andover Street and walk to the school. But, we know that that's a sensitive topic. So if you could scroll down, Gene, to the next one. So this shows the other side of the site. So this is going southeast along 114. You can see, again, the taller buildings are focused on Route 114 or the commercial properties abutting our site. There's a pretty significant wetland area to the back that we're preserving in its entirety. But again, you can see there's significant buffers here, both from our buildings to the property line, and also to existing structures. So just to give you, and again, we'll send you these graphics, but just in the sort of curved building closest to the property line, the distance from the edge of that building to the nearest house is 449 feet. So it's very significantly far away. And from the office building that's indicated in purple here, it's 415 feet. And then Gene, you can go back to the, or go to the forward one more to the next slide. So this is the one that we talked about. So, and we're happy to go through any of these in detail. This is just meant to sort of give some examples of other projects that we know of that, have, and per the request of the working group, just to show, some existing conditions of 5-story buildings adjacent to single-family houses. So on the left is the Merck Moody and Main in Waltham. This is approximately 50 feet to the nearest single-family house. And yes, Waltham's a different context, but what we liked about this one is that it shows, a 5-story building fronting onto a historic park, which, it's really nice. It's a nice context, and it's very similar to what we think the feel will be at our sort of new town green, village green entrance to our site. The middle images are of Avalon and Quincy. So this was one that we found interesting because it's 5 to 6 stories. These are relatively tall buildings, but they begin to show how they work next with a wooded buffer next to single family houses. So these are about 240 feet to the single family houses. And again, from our tallest buildings, except in that one location, but mostly on our site, we're talking about 400 feet to the houses. And the one on the right is Avalon Saugus, which I think some of the members of the board are a little bit familiar with. This is, again, is 5-story buildings. And again, the closest that these buildings come to the surrounding houses is 136 feet. So we're talking about, on average, 140 feet to the property line, and quite a bit further than that to the houses themselves. And for our tallest buildings, the proposed 5-story buildings, we're talking like 400 feet away in most cases. So that's the end of the presentation. And again, you know, we've heard the questions. We'll continue to develop the graphics, and I think that they really will help sort of illustrate what we're talking about here, about what you actually will see. And we're happy to put those together for the board. So I think that's all we have for tonight. You know, we're happy to take any further questions. And, you know, obviously we'll be back in front of you in a few short weeks to discuss more about the project.
I do have a question. So I was looking at the project review calendar that's put together for our next few months together. And I was just wondering when is school impact going to be addressed? Which one of those days?
So we hope to really touch on that in pretty good detail on the 24th, the next meeting, where we will present the fiscal impact study, and we'll be able to go through that line by line with you. So that's something that we're continuing to develop right now.
Okay, so that's when we'll have the superintendent talking about the students and the schools and any potential impact, or no?
I think that's the intent. I don't think we've formalized that yet, but right now I think that that's quite possible. We'll take that. We know that that's an important topic, and you know, we'll work with Jean to try to, you know, finalize the agenda for that meeting, and include you know, be able to include the superintendent.
It may be that we don't ask the superintendent to come in until we've seen this fiscal impact study, had the peer review fiscal impact study, and have a chance to look at kind of all the numbers. It may make sense to have him in a little bit later in the game where we've had a chance to kind of flush out the numbers a little bit more.
Okay.
All right. If I could, Eitan, I'd like to just circle back to the Merrimack College building. And I understand what is trying to be achieved is to kind of show context to the surrounding area and other building heights. But in your packet is a page of the plan that Verizon submitted for Merrimack College's wireless facility to be mounted on the Rogers building. And that is the building that you had pointed out, Mike, the kind of primary building and off of Route 114. So that sits back at least 300 feet because that's the radius that they have to show buildings within and other heights within that radius. And so I think it's just a point of clarification. The main roof is 48 feet on that building, and the highest top of the proposed Verizon fiberglass cylinders that were being put on are 10 feet above that. So the cylinders, which I forget how many got put on top of the roof, but they were kind of like bollard looking cylinders, were 58 feet.
Okay. Jean, is there anything else we need to go over tonight?
No, I think that's it. I mean, there's more detailed information in your packet that just kind of summarizes building heights and number of floors per building. It's just kind of all informational, but I think they captured it within their presentation.
Great.
Eitan, I've got a question.
Okay.
So I'm still struggling with this question a little bit through the last few meetings we've had. And what I'm struggling with is to have a better understanding of the comparative density on this site between what it is now and what you're proposing. And so my question is, what is the current measure that we're using? Is it, for example, number of units?
So we're happy to give you that figure of number of units, you know, per acre. That only tells part of the story. That only tells, you know, the residential part of the story. But if you know, we're happy to give you that you could compare, you know, to other projects. You know, we've also
that was a question. That was a question asking what is the unit of measure. I don't think that number of units is sufficient. I agree with you. I think that's a good observation. I think what I am asking for, Eitan, is the possibility of multiple measures so that we can have a better sense of the comparative density. So let me give an example. The only reason I mentioned units is when I've asked last time, the answer I got was on the basis of units. It's not because I prefer that. That's what I was given last time. So, for example,
A floor area ratio is I mean, I think that's one we're using.
Yes.
What's that again, Eitan? I didn't hear you.
Sorry, floor area ratio.
Sure. And so that would be a second one. One that I'd be interested in is number of beds. You know, so that, for example, if you have a unit that's a 3-bedroom unit, then that's 3. And a unit that's 1 bedroom, that's 1. And 1,000 college student dorm, that's 1,000. So, but again, I really agree. I think it's a great point that we should be careful of a single measure. I would like to see something that has multiple units of measure comparing current to future with a goal towards a better understanding of the change in density. And I would like to see one of those measures being, probably bed is the wrong term, maybe bedrooms, you know, so, you know, that unit would show a different number if it's a 3-bedroom unit than a 1-bedroom unit. And it also, to me, you know, when last time I asked and I was given an answer on the basis of units, the answer was, I think, properly caveated that, you know, it's a little hard to apply the unit measure to the Merrimack College dorms. And I agree with that. And that's why I'm asking for a measure current and future based on number of bedrooms.
Well,
And I would also like to ask for one additional measure, for example, number of parking spaces.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
and I,
So
I mean,
if you get the idea there, it might be, you know, 4 or 5 or 6 rows in a table that show here's the current, here's the future, and if there's a way to somehow have a measure that does reflect retail space, I would welcome that as well. But anyway, is that something that, Eitan, we could ask for prior to the next meeting?
yeah, I think so. I mean, I think it's combining a bunch of items that we probably already have and putting them
Right.
in one place. Peter,
Yes.
your point about, and we have talked about the beds versus the units, and we asked them to put it into number of units instead of estimated as beds. But I think what you're getting at in that sense is number of people, really, which I think we can estimate. You know, if you have a 3-bedroom apartment or a townhouse, we estimate the number of children. I assume we can estimate the number of people as well.
Yeah.
Well, but in this case, Eitan, yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with your logic there. I think it flows quite well, but I think as a measure saying, well, here's how many people we think in the future, it does beg the question of, well, how'd you come up with that? Whereas if you have a multi-measure table, so, you know, one row could be a number of people, current.
No,
and
I was just
future,
saying add that to the
number of kids.
Yeah, I was just saying
But-
add that
but-
one.
Yes, added, as long as we still have how many bedrooms. I think the bedrooms might turn out to be a very useful, you know, it's also a measure I think people can get their head around.
Okay. Yeah, yeah, like just a combined chart with those kind of, I mean, I think so bedrooms, people, parking spaces, floor area ratio. I mean, any kind of ways that we're measuring this project, I think would be helpful to put in one chart. I think we can do that. That shouldn't be too hard.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Well, let's if it's appropriate, if it's allowable, Eitan, let's ask for that as a deliverable prior to the next meeting.
Okay. See what you guys can do.
Yeah, that's no problem.
And
We
Eitan,
will-
would it be reasonable too to make sure that with that it's got adults to children so we can see how many what the K
Yeah.
through 12 impact would be in that chart?
Yeah, assuming that's going to be part of the fiscal impact study for the next meeting anyway. So just
That's
put it
right.
in that extra chart.
Yeah.
Okay. So why don't we end there? If it's okay with everybody, let's we'll do the minutes next time. Gene, let's just add them to the next one if that's okay.
Eitan, can I just I
Yeah.
have one more comment that came in,
Sure.
and I've had some back and forth with her. Her name is Patricia DeSantis. She lives on Berkeley Road, and she was having trouble hearing the meeting on Channel 8 Comcast. She sent me a screen print of what she does see, so I'm just questioning back and forth if she's definitely watching Channel 8, because I put it on at my house right now, and it is displaying the meeting, and it does have audio. So she's hearing music only, so I will work with her to make sure she knows how to access the recorded version and
Okay.
how to access in the future.
Very good.
Eitan, I have one other item unrelated to this that's just a sentence long, if I can do that.
Okay, so we done, anybody got anything else on Royal Crest? Nothing. Okay, thank you, everybody, for
Thank you,
tonight.
everybody.
Thank you. Thank you,
Appreciate
members of the
it.
board. Stay safe.
All right, additional item, Peter.
Yes, just for the benefit of the board, the kickoff meeting for the watershed plan update is tomorrow.
Okay, is that a Zoom or Google Meet thing, or how's that being done?
Well, I'm planning to attend to represent, I'm planning to attend as a member of the planning board.
Okay, is it being done live somewhere, or is it a teleconference?
No, so as a follow-up, Peter had asked last meeting if we've awarded a contract yet, and
Yeah.
because I hadn't had that executed yet, I didn't announce what it was. So it's Weston and Sampson has been awarded it. The kickoff meeting is just part of the project calendar that they presented in their award. It is not a public meeting or anything. There's just a small group of stakeholders that we've identified to meet with
Okay.
them. And then there's going to be a broader group of stakeholders that we're going to bring in periodically. And so all that plan will be established tomorrow, I would say.
Okay.
So right now, it's the water treatment plant, couple from DPW, Peter, myself, Dan, and Andrew. And we invited somebody from the health department, but I don't believe they can make it.
Sounds good. Thanks, Peter. Thanks, Gene. Okay, so can we get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all in favor, John?
Yes.
Aaron, is Aaron here? I don't even hear him tonight.
I'm here, and yes, let's adjourn.
All right. I agree. Peter?
Yes.
Okay, motion adjourned. Good job, everybody.